How's it going? It's Demon Knight. Demon Knight as in the man. Today we're going to be talking about Mdewakanton census rolls and how important they are and how misunderstood they are and how manipulated they are and how incorrect they are. Okay, just a brief summary. Obviously, 1805 was the first treaty signing with Sioux. We'll skip a couple decades, 1820s, 1830s. This was a hit for French Canadians to go ahead, get themselves a mixed blood Dakota woman, half blood, full blood. Go ahead and get yourself a Dakota woman. Why? Because they're going to get allotments and annuity money. So French Canadian men, they all probably got in a huddle and said, get these women on 3, 1, 2, 3, get Sioux women. And that's what's happened. 1855, the Johnson and Jones report of the half-blood Sioux and mixed-blood Sioux of Lake Pepin. See, the Treaty of 1837 made it where the chief descendants got money and eligible for land, treaty land allotments. So, like in 1886, they made these census rolls, but we got to understand, 1855, there was only anywhere from 640, 650 people on the census roll. Now, as history goes through, the state gets established in 1858, which is the last treaty with Sioux. But land was being given to the half-bloods and the mixed-bloods before the state was established, which made it where when the 10 miles on each side of the Minnesota River, Upper Sioux went on the one side, Roy's area 413 and 414, and the Mdewakanton Wapakute went on to Roy's 440. This was right after the treaty signing. So then the war broke out. Dakotas were starving. Annuity payments weren't being paid. You see, they never treated the full-blooded Mdewakantons good. Only the French Canadian mixed bloods were treated well, got money on time, got allotments. And we'll go into that in a little bit why. So as the war breaks out, Abraham Lincoln signs for the Dakota Removal Act. This banded Dakota Indians from Minnesota from 1863 until 2009. Dakotas were shipped off on the Mississippi River to go to Davenport, Iowa for prison, and then placed on the Santee, Nebraska reservation. Okay, this is Sisseton, Wahpeton, Mdewakanton, Wapakute. These people are getting sent out of state. But as time went on, there was mercy given unto the friendly Sioux, is what they identified him as. And half-blood Walter McClendon, I believe his last name was Walter. He was a half-blood. See, they put him as an Indian agent to be able to record census rolls. Now you got to understand, what is a census roll? This is when Indian people would get in the line to be able to be listed on the census roll and their offspring. So occasionally you would have to meet in places in Minnesota to be on these census rolls. While you're in line, these Dakotas, Mdewakantons were noticing that Sisseton were being placed onto these rolls, and other bands of Dakota. But see, the thing was is that was most of the time, most of these people on these rolls are women. So women aren't going to call out a white man doing something incorrectly, especially after the war. If you complained, I mean, there was threats of these Indian agents saying, "We'll take you off the census roll if you have a complaint about it." Or they were getting paid off. Dakota elders were saying that Indians were paying Walter, going into Robert B. Hinton, who made 2 census rolls in 1886. One would ask, why would you make 2 census rolls in the same year? Well, because he was adding on more names onto this list. See, this is why the 1886 lists are unreliable to determine Mdewakanton ancestry. There are Mdewakantons on this list, correct, but to say that this is a thoroughly complete list is incorrect. So that's when Robert B. Hinton died. Then James McLaughlin became the U.S. Indian agent, and he came to St. Paul as a 21-year-old, got married to a half-blood Sioux, Mdewakanton woman. So it goes back into these French Canadian men. You know, James McLaughlin made damn sure his kids were on these census rolls, and he has a wife that's Mdewakanton, so he's able to, communicate with his wife and other French Canadian men of who is who. And this is why you see the 1899 census roll of Minnesota Mdewakanton Sioux Indians. It's a smaller list, and not everybody on the 1886 list is on this list because this list was supposed to be edited. The government always knew that the Mdewakantons there wasn't a lot of us. A lot of money was paid to us, a lot of land was sold from us, but there wasn't a lot of us. Chief descendants were taken care of, not as a whole. So anyway, a French Canadian man, he's writing affidavits even, saying, you know what, my 15 kids need their annuity payments and their allotments of land. ASAP, go do that for me, homeboy. Henry Sibley had Dakota wives. These men knew that it was like, you know what, we get with these honeys, we get sovereign land and money, and we explored this territory. That was a deal for the French Canadian men, and men to this day are still trying to get with Sioux women for the assets that they can obtain. I mean, this is a hundreds of years type of thing. Now, Mdewakanton Dakota women, they're good looking women, so I don't, disagree with trying to get with them, but it was a manipulated way where our ancestry with these census rolls, which leaded to 1917, another roll was prepared. There was a lawsuit that happened saying, yo, James, these Indians, these Mdewakantons and Wapakutes, they're owed annuity payments. So then the case, as it's going into 1922, finally 1925, there was a census annuity payout. It was $129. My grandpa and my grandmother got it. And there was only, I believe, not even maybe 2,100 people, maybe 2,200 people on this list. So even smaller than the 1899. Still editing these lists. But as of 1908, 1911, going through the decades, Pipestone Agency, they had an Office for Records and Indian Affairs, and also the Pipestone schools, which brought back many other Dakota bands back into Minnesota. So when you think to yourself, how did we come back to Minnesota as Dakota people when we were banned until 2009? Well, the schools was a reason for you to come back. So then, as you see, in 1927 unto 1940, Pipestone Agency was recording the children that went to these schools and their offspring. This is an unreliable source to determine Mdewakanton ancestry for sure. These rolls were not prepared by U.S. Indian agents. They were prepared by commissioners or superintendents. They tried to, in 1940, make a Yankton roll, a Sisseton roll, and a Mdewakanton roll, and still failed uh, to correct families on these rolls. So this is when rolls were done for decades until Indian Claims Commission came around in 1967 saying, attention, lineal descendants of Mdewakanton Wapakude who are not enrolled as community members unto the Prairie Island Indian community, the Lower Sioux Indian community, and the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community. If you're not enrolled with these communities, the Secretary of Interior is preparing a roll. 1972 is when this roll was established. Throughout decades, people did not want to be Indian. This was not a good thing. Not until the 1990s when the powwow boom happened and casino gambling. It wasn't cool to have a feather tattoo back then. Even just in these simple towns we live in right now, it was bad being Indian. You got to ask your parents or your grandparents. And as you go further in history, you can notice people avoided being on census rolls. Why? Because women were marrying settlers saying, keep the money, keep the land. I'm Indian. It's a bad thing. You know, I know a story that my uncle told me, my great uncle told me. Grandpa John's sisters, they were all raised on a wheatland allotment of Indian land given to my family before the Dakota War. The daughters started crying, saying, Mom, we're not really part Indian, are we? Now, their mother was a half-blood Mdewakanton. So, I mean, crying because they were Indian. I mean, I can't explain enough and appreciate the elders who continuously stayed on the census rolls throughout the 1800s and the 1900s because of the harassment. So that was just a little couple bullet points. I can go more thorough into stories all day, but I try to keep it short. Just tomorrow night, as in the man, chase the dream.